We're going to get started. So welcome everybody to today's webinar, which is all about EE-Works, and you're going to find out more about EE-Works and what it means. I'm going to give just a quick overview, but we are so excited that you could join us today because this is really going to be a wonderful webinar. We have such amazing speakers. My name is Judy Brous. I'm the Executive Director of NAAEE, and really happy that you are here as part of our 50th anniversary year. Really excited about that. And we will be talking about EE-Works, which is all about demonstrating the value and impact of environmental education. And just looking at everybody that's joining, many of you are working in this field. And when I first started at NAAEE, people asked, I need help making the case for environmental education. What's the research say? What are we doing? And so EE-Works started as thinking about that. How do we demonstrate the power of environmental education? And how do we get that evidence? So we're going to be talking about the systematic research reviews that actually look at the role of environmental education in achieving positive outcomes. Also the communication tools that actually showcase what the findings are, coupled with really compelling stories and messaging suggestions, and the engaging anecdotes that our field is so good about, and trying to link the anecdotes and the evidence. And that's what we're trying to do. And we did this by themes. And luckily we have so many great partners that we've been working with. And the themes, K through 12 student outcomes, are already on the website. Today we'll be talking about conservation, climate education and climate adaptation in early childhood. And then coming down the pike, and Tanoya will talk more about it, citizen science, civic engagement, positive youth development, and a summary document about what we learned. So it's really an exciting project. And the point of this is not to say that stories are bad, it's that we need compelling stories and we need evidence. And by combining the two, showcasing what the research is saying actually works and what we're learning, to be able to use that to develop better programming. We also know that we need better ways to actually talk about what we do and sell what we do to people who really don't know the value and impact of environmental education, because those of us in this field know that it works. So I want to thank all the partners and sponsors who have helped support EE-Works. It's been a wonderful journey with all of these partners and researchers. And I also want to thank the leaders on our NAAEE team, Tanoya and Drew, who have done so much to help keep us on track and really get us to where we are today, working with all our research pals. And we do have an incredible lineup today with Martha, Allison, and Nicole. I will introduce them more fully in just a minute, but just want to give you some quick background here in terms of our webinars. For those of you who have not been on any of our NAAEE webinars, we are trying to bring new ideas and new insights to the field, have speakers on a range of topics that cover not only environmental education, but related fields that help us all learn and grow. And we would love it if you would send us your ideas of other speakers or other ideas that you have as we continue to offer this webinar series for free for anyone who wants to join and learn and interact with us. So really happy to have you here. We also couldn't do this without all our partners, and we're so excited that this is part of the Forest Service Inspire series. We're so lucky to be working with our friends at the Forest Service, and E-Inspire is trying to bring these great ideas to all the Forest Service staff and other government agencies, as well as our entire network. And I just want to give a chance and a call out to Heidi McAllister, who has been our partner from the beginning. And Heidi, if you want to say a few words, that would be fantastic.
Sure. First of all, just welcome everybody. We are so very happy you could join us today for this really, really exciting conversation about how we present environmental education. And one of the reasons we started with EE-Inspire, our Forest Service webinar series in conjunction with NAAEE, is that we have staff all over the nation in lots of different places, and some are in really remote locations. And we really wanted to bring national level professional development benefit to our staff. So that's what we wanted to bring, that spark to them. So that's what we're doing with this webinar series as well. And I'm just thrilled to be here with you all and learn a little bit more about the EE Works program, because they've come up with some really, really neat things, and I'm happy we can share them with you. So back to you, Judy.
Heidi, thank you so much for all your support. And I also want to thank all our affiliate co-hosts. A number of you are online today, our partners in this webinar series. And if you don't know who your state affiliate is, or your provincial affiliate or regional affiliate, please check them out. They do amazing work, and we're all trying to advance environmental literacy and civic engagement. Also, thanks to EPA and EE360 for allowing us to also help support this webinar series. Really excited about that. And just want to thank Anne again for all the work that she does managing the webinar series, and always here together. We've been doing probably 8,000 webinars, Anne, together, a lot. And if you have any questions, you can always email Anne or myself. And we also know that you've been on a few Zoom calls during the pandemic. And you know, even though you all probably know Zoom inside and out, some people use Teams and different platforms. So just want to remind you that everybody is muted, but you can communicate with us by using the chat, and you can send a note just to the panelists or to everyone. And if you have questions or you have ideas or suggestions, please enter them in the chat at any time, and you'll get a copy of the recording, you'll get a copy of the PowerPoint, and you'll get a copy of the chat so that you'll have everything and you don't need to take notes. And we're also really excited that we have Joe here live captioning today for anyone who might need help with the audio. Sometimes it helps, especially if English is your second language, or you have issues that you can't hear clearly, the captioning can truly help you. So feel free to use that. Okay, so now the best part of today is introducing our speakers and hearing from them. And I'm going to introduce them all at once here, very short intros. I could go on and on and on with all of them. They're so talented. But I'm going to start with Allison. This will be the order that they'll be speaking on, and Allison will come back on again. But Allison is our first speaker. She is a research consultant and methodologist with a PhD in educational research and evaluation. She has worked as a field-based environmental educator and special education teacher. Through her current work in Nicole Arduin Social Ecology Lab at Stanford, she is involved in several projects focused on design thinking, collective action, and research reviews like EE Works. And we are so lucky, Allison, to have you on this project. And next we have Martha Monroe, who has been a leader in the field of EE for more than 3 decades, maybe 4 decades. She has coordinated 2 projects for EE Works, one on climate change education strategies and another one on outreach strategies for community climate change adaptation. She is a professor and associate director at the University of Florida School of Forest, Fisheries, and Geometric Sciences. That's quite a mouthful. And she earned her PhD at the University of Michigan in 1991 and has been leading great research to practice efforts ever since. And we met doing something for Peace Corps many, many years ago. And finally, we have Nicole Arduin, who is an associate professor at Stanford University. She is the Emmett Family Faculty Scholar and Sykes E. Eiper Faculty Director of the Emmett Interdisciplinary Program in Environment and Resources, the longest title ever, Nicole, in the School of Earth, Energy, and Environmental Sciences. She runs the Social Ecology Lab, and that's an interdisciplinary cross-campus group that focuses on individual and collective engagement in sustainability-related behaviors and practices, as well as people's connection to places and how those influence their relationship to each other and the broader ecosystem. So these 3 amazing people are going to be talking about EE Works. So Allison, I'm going to turn it over to you and stop sharing. And so happy you all could be here.
Thanks, Judy. Are you sharing your screen for the presentation for us?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
It just went out for a minute. It's coming back. Here we go.
Thank you. What an honor to be presenting with Nicole and Martha and Judy here, just three of the giants in the field. So I'm excited, and what an honor to see so many people interested in research. As a researcher, that's such an honor. So thank you all. I'm going to give a very quick introduction to systematic reviews. You may have heard systematic reviews in the news, usually in reference to medical field or to the health field. You might hear something about a systematic review of studies that examine the efficacy of a vaccine or of a drug to treat high blood pressure. And so while systematic reviews did start in the medical field, they've since been expanded and adopted by many fields of study. And because of that, there's many different conceptualizations, different viewpoints, different definitions of systematic reviews. So for the EE Works project, we tended to think of them as a well-documented, structured review of research, meaning we tried to follow a general kind of set of prescribed steps. We documented it so it could be transparent, other people could see what we were doing. And we used it just as a tool to look at a swath of literature related to some aspect of environmental education. So why pick a systematic review? Why pick a structured review versus a traditional kind of literature review where you might cherry pick what you want to focus on? Mainly, I find they're helpful because of the tremendous growth in scholarly research, that there's just so much being published now that it's impossible, certainly for researchers and certainly for practitioners, to stay up to date. So having a systematic review gives us a chance for someone else to do the hard thinking and the hard work of collating all that research and coming up with what's it saying, what's the message. In theory, there's potentially less bias because you're following a set of steps and you're documenting it and trying to be transparent. As a researcher, it simplifies decision-making. You're not saying, oh, what do I do next? Because you're following that set of prescribed steps. And then because some people might be familiar with systematic review and its process, such as funders or policymakers, it can really kind of facilitate what you find in the research. Next. So as I said, there's different ways to conduct systematic reviews. I'm going to briefly talk about the 8 steps we tried to follow in each of the reviews. The first one being identify the topic and research question. So you meet internally as a review team, and then we had the benefit of working with some fantastic advisory boards, help us figure out exactly, we had our overall topic, but what were we really interested in? What questions were we trying to answer? That helps you narrow your scope and make it more manageable. You go to the next step, which is kind of the pre-searching, your scoping search. That's just a general searches to figure out what's out there. We're looking at this research, what's out there, what's an idea. And this helps you determine your search terms, which you'll use in the third step. And so in the third step, you actually go and search for the literature that you want to review. So using the keywords you hopefully identified in the previous step, you search. We used academic databases for the most part, specifically EBSCO, which is a meta database that searches like a bunch of different databases. And we entered our search terms, our keywords, and our search parameters, such as when stuff was published, if we wanted English only, if we wanted it to be peer reviewed. And then the database spits out all the results, anywhere from 300, 500, 1,000, 2,000 results. And we imported that into Zotero, a bibliographic management system. And in Zotero, we then began to vet the results. So you look at those thousands of results you got in the first round, your team looks at the abstracts and says, is this relevant? Is this going to help us answer the question? And you use a decision tree, some criteria to help you figure that out. You go to the abstracts, you narrow that down, then you look at full text, you apply those same criteria again, and you narrow down even fuller to your next finer sample. And it takes us to our next step. Next. And that once you have your final sample, whether it's 20 articles, 50 articles, 100, 200 articles, you extract your data. And this is getting the information you want from those studies. We used a combination of NVivo, a qualitative software management system, or sometimes we used Excel to extract that data and identify the data. Then you analyze the data. And again, you have many choices on what you're going to do with that data. We tended to do basic kind of descriptive data to start with. 80% of the articles said this, 20% said that. We sometimes ran chi-squares and other statistics to look at those counts. And then we usually also finished up with a thematic analysis to kind of, what's the main message? What's the gist of it? What are these authors of all these studies really trying to tell us about what we're asking? You take that data, once you've analyzed it, you write up your methods. In this cases, we we wrote them in the form of a journal article. And in the next step, you try to share that journal article and hopefully get it published and take action. And on our end, we published a journal article, and then we work with the fantastic folks at NAAEE on communication efforts. We also work with folks in our own universities and our own communities to get the word out about what we found in these reviews. Next. And so this was a really quick overview. Luckily, you have a wonderful document created by the NAAEE staff that you can access on their website here. That's a summary of all the methods. So when you go to a funder or a board that's you're presenting these findings, you can say, oh, I can tell you all about these systematic reviews in the process, and this document's a fantastic way to do that. So I will throw it next to Martha.
Thanks, Allison. And yes, I also am delighted to be on this webinar and share some of the things that we've been doing. As Allison mentioned, that first step of figuring out what the question is really important. And we've realized there's a couple different ways to do that. And if you think about the logic model with the activity on one end and the short-term outcomes and then the long-term impact, the difference between these ways of doing the questions relates to the logic model. For example, you could say, given these wonderful environmental education programs, what is it they achieve? So that your question is focused on the short-term outcome. Next, please. You could also start by, thanks, assuming you have those successful outcomes and work backwards to figure out what are the strategies that the educators use to reach these outcomes. And so you can go forwards or backwards with the activity and the outcome. Next, please. You can also look at this more distant impact goal and say, well, if that's what we want to achieve, then what are the indicators or short-term outcomes that are going to head us in that direction? And what are the strategies that we use to get there? So as we talk about these 4 different projects that we've talked about, that we've done for EEWorks, you can see where we've located the guiding questions for each of these. Next. So I was working on climate change, and as you can see, it's perfect for a systematic literature review because there's been an exponential increase in the literature that's out there on climate change education. You can get over 1 million hits on Google Scholar, like anybody would ever be able to go through them all, and it's just more and more every day. Next. We started our question by thinking about what are the strategies educators are using that accounts for success in climate change education. And as Allison mentioned, we have to search on certain terms. So we use climate change and then a whole suite of educational terms, conservation education, environmental education, science education, et cetera, to try to get the big picture. What do we know out there? No matter which door we're coming into this room, what is it that we're learning? Next. And when we did that, the search, we ended up with about 1,000 articles. We didn't read the whole article, we only read the abstract. And we read the abstract thinking about this decision tree. Is it really focused on climate change education? Did they do an intervention and did they evaluate it for the program? Did they report the outcomes in a way that we can understand what strategies they used that led to their success? And by the time we narrowed down that decision tree, we ended up with 49 papers that we analyzed and synthesized. Next. What we got, as you can imagine, is mostly information from schools, universities, classrooms, but there were some from non-formal environments, some teacher education, some adult. One was even an online program. Most related to knowledge, a few that had to do with attitudes and behavior. So they were really trying to change those things. Next. We ended up with 6 themes, and I find them easy to think about in 3 main points. The first, that climate science education is relevant, interesting, engaging. We already know that because we're environmental educators, but climate change education can be distant, future, hard to get your hands on. So how do you make it hands-on? Well, in the cases of these papers, they did it by making it relevant and local, looking at the impacts of climate change, not just carbon dioxide. Some of the papers, some of the programs worked with scientists and collected data, which helps make it relevant and impactful. And they all used active and engaging teaching methods, whether it was worksheets or discussions or data collection in the field, that's what they were doing. We know good environmental education also does more than that. And many of these programs also use school and community-based projects to teach skills of problem solving and communication, to build efficacy, to build hope, to engage students in with community leaders of things that were actually going on. I found the most interesting thing when we looked at all these themes was that there was a subset of these papers where they were actually helping the learners think about what they know and how they know it. And that understanding of what you know was essential to help overcome misconceptions, identify the difference between evidence and inference, to think about deliberation and how people are actually understanding why people think differently about climate change. So it was fascinating. Next. If you want to read the paper, oh dear, that's going to take forever. Sorry about that. There is a paper, it's a link on EEWorks, and so you can find it. You can just, oh, thank you. There is a paper, but we can go on to the next one. Thanks, Judy. So that didn't answer all of our questions about climate change. We also wondered, outside the school system, what is it that educators are doing with adults and communities to help communities work toward adaptation planning? So a different set of search terms, a different set of papers. Next. This only had 300 papers. We read the abstracts. We boiled it down to 50. Next. And this was not, this was just a completely different category of papers. We were excluding anything that had to do with schools and youth. We were looking at adults and community. It was much more international because there's been a lot of evidence, a lot of work at the research level, thinking about who's most vulnerable for climate change and how do we help them adapt. So those are the topics, and North American papers were only 1/4 of the ones that we found. Next. So here's what we found. The first step is really one of the most important. You have to figure out who's coming. Who are you talking to? Are you selecting experts in order to collectively formulate some recommendations? Or are you opening the doors to the public and letting everybody come in? Depending on what you choose to do, you may have different avenues for how you proceed. And that first step of welcoming people and getting them all on the same page was really essential, because many of these papers and programs used a participatory approach to engage people in their own learning. So they were tapping local expertise and thinking about social learning. It was essential, and particularly if they're in an area where there's likely to be conflict, it was just really important that they started these ways. Next. They also worked hard to create visualizations for climate change. They needed to get people on the same page. What sorts of projections are we talking about? What did the scientists tell us? And so they focused on those maps and timelines and a variety of things. They dealt with trust and uncertainty. They thought about their time that they had together. Next. And we found in general that top-down approaches, like from a federal organization, are really essential to establish the priorities so that communities know that they need to adapt and to say, oh yeah, things are changing. But it's these bottom-up strategies at each community that can be localized and individualized, affect what a community respects and wants to protect, what they think is most vulnerable, and build ownership and responsibility for these changes. So that's where environmental educators and extension agents can be useful in helping to create that process where communities can engage, experiment, monitor, create their own future. So and there's some papers next. Oh, good, this one came out better. There's a paper that does the literature review essence, but there's also a condensed version for extension agents that might be helpful to people. So both are available. And that ends the climate change piece. I will look on the chat for any questions I can answer and hand this over to Nicole or Allison.
And Nicole, I'll have it up again in just a minute.
Wonderful. Thank you, Judy.
Here it comes. Thanks, Nicole.
Great. And I'm going to get my screen set here while you're doing that. Wonderful. Well, thanks so much, Martha. That was so interesting. I always love hearing you talk about that. I'm always struck by how many connections there are with the work that you've done in climate and the other pieces that we've done thus far. I'd also like to thank Allison for her overview. Allison and I have worked together for over a decade, and I still am always blown away by the clarity and grace with which she describes this incredibly complicated process. It's truly an honor to work with both Martha and Allison on these reviews, and also with Judy and her team, Judy and Tanoya, Drew, Melissa, everyone else at NAAA. It's such a pleasure. I will also say that these reviews truly take a village. And so Heidi, who is on the advisory group, and all the other advisors, many of whom I hope are here today, have been so helpful in doing the piece of these reviews that is the most critical. Martha mentioned that starting with a question is such an important piece. And I cannot overstate the importance of starting with the right question. These reviews can be enormous and often are years in the making. And I know that when you see them coming out with these beautiful articles that Martha just described, you know, in the end, they look clear and crisp, but really that is about getting to the right question. So I'll start here with just showing you these questions that we had for guiding the conservation review that we did. And in particular, we were trying to look at what is the role of environmental education in reaching conservation outcomes. So we looked at in what ways are researchers and practitioners measuring conservation and environmental quality outcomes with regard to environmental education. And that we looked at a subset then, we thought what trends are occurring in studies that report directly observed outcomes of environmental behaviors. So from those guiding questions, we followed the process that Allison described earlier. This sounds easy, but as you've heard, it's actually not an easy process at all. There are so many different kinds of conservation outcomes that you can imagine. One of the other really important pieces of this, and Allison alluded to this earlier, is whenever possible, and this is anyone who's interested in doing a review yourself or with your team, one of the biggest takeaways that we've learned through these processes is the importance of relying on work that other people have done. And this is something that's a trick that's used often in academia. It's actually standing on the shoulders of giants. And so we, instead of coming up with our own list of what conservation outcomes could be or should be, we went to Rockstrom's Planetary Boundaries, which many of you may have used in your work, or you may have read pieces by Rockstrom and team. This has been cited more than 5,000 times. And so when you see this list, it may not be the list that you would have developed. The great thing about it is that we can point to more than 5,000 citations. So when you see this searched for list here, that comes from Rockstrom's Planetary Boundaries. We then also combined that with all these different kinds of terms for environmental education, conservation education, education for sustainability, et cetera, to come up with our search terms. Next slide, please. In doing that process, it's similar to what Martha just described. That initial process then turns out a ton of articles and abstracts. So we ended up with more than 2,000 abstracts. And we used the decision tree that Allison described earlier. So we tried to look at, based on this, we used the decision tree to look at what kinds of environmental education interventions were assessed. Did they actually have some kind of environmental education outcome measured or reported? And then we did a brief quality check. This is always a little bit tricky because we try hard not to put too many boundaries on this at that point. But if it meets all these criteria, then we get down to the point of actually reading the article. So that got us to 286. And then in the end, we ended up with 105 articles in our final data set. Next slide, please. So one of the most important parts of the review, and Martha alluded to this earlier as well, is to try to think about what are the actual outcomes that these studies are trying to measure. So as a reminder, we ourselves are not doing the studies. We're trying to look across the whole field and trying to see what are other people trying to measure. And so we were really interested in how are people thinking about outcomes of studies that are interested in conservation. And so I'll direct your attention to the right-hand side of the screen here, which is looking at this table of outcomes. One of the things that first struck us when we looked across these articles was how many of these articles and studies were not measuring direct ecological outcomes or conservation outcomes, but rather we're measuring things like what we would call behavioral antecedents. So instead, all those actions that lead people up to taking conservation outcomes. Those of us who come from a social science background, that may not be surprising. These are all the things that we think about in environmental education all the time. These are things like knowledge, attitudes, values, skills, and some of them mentioned by Martha earlier as well. So things like trust and collaboration and cooperation, all the things that take us toward being effective in conservation. So the actions like capacity building, self-reported behavior, these were things that you can see many of the articles measure those, many fewer are measuring the actual ecological indicators. In fact, it was only 4% of the articles were actually measuring ecological indicators. Because, however, oh, I'm sorry, Judy, if we could go back to that for just 1 second. Because, however, we were really interested in, and I have a background working in conservation organizations with Judy and others here, we were really interested in getting to those ecological indicators, which is the top part on the left-hand side of this. We have a pyramid. The top part of that pyramid, that was kind of the driving question here, and our advisors were really interested in that. And because of that, we decided to take a subsample. So we pulled out a subsample of the articles, which was just over 50 articles that were measuring those ecological outcomes and those ecological outcomes that were direct and on the ground. And we thought, can we dig into those a little bit more and figure out what actually is happening on the ground? Can we figure out what is it that's different about those programs? What's different about environmental education in those cases? Next slide, please. In this, and I realize this is small on your screen, so therefore I will encourage you to look at the brief that NAAAE has prepared. We also have a couple of practitioner and funder briefs and policymaker briefs that we've prepared, and then the article itself, which came out in fall of 2019. But I'll just mention a couple of highlights. We divided them up by geographic emphasis. We also looked at whether they were involving youth, adults, or a combination of youth and adults. And then we also looked at the various topics they were addressing, whether it was pollution or biodiversity or climate change, et cetera. And I'll just mention a couple of things here. You can see that a lot of these studies are working in North America. Not surprisingly, I can come back to that if we have time at the end or any questions. Interestingly, and again, perhaps not surprisingly, the majority of the studies that are measuring direct conservation outcomes are measuring biodiversity and pollution. The majority of the articles measuring direct conservation outcomes are measuring things like pollution, which again is perhaps not surprising because that's something that you can see, you can measure relatively easily within the context of a relatively short study. So we have some thoughts on why this may be occurring, which we're happy to come back to in the Q&A portion. Next slide. Thank you. In the end, with this, especially with this subsample, but also looking across all of the studies, we have a couple of takeaways and top line findings that are important for practitioners and also interesting for researchers. It's something that we've been thinking about a lot since we did this study and we looked at the literature. There were some elements of these studies that were really interesting to see. What was it about those projects and the research itself that were the ones that were most likely to have an impact from environmental education in conservation outcomes? First, it was the studies that had a very local focus. So conservation projects that had an environmental education element and that had a local focus. For the sake of time, I won't go into waxing about why we think this is, but we do talk about it a bit in the article, and the NAAAE piece also talks about it, the EE Works piece. Second, those that work directly with scientists, natural resource managers, local conservation organizations, so that really had this direct partnership from the beginning, tended to be the ones that were measuring these direct conservation outcomes. Those that incorporated action projects actually into the conservation project itself and into the environmental education program itself were the ones that had these direct conservation outcomes. And finally, this one is kind of one of those no-brainers, but it's also a really interesting one, which is that those projects that were intentional and creative and thorough in measuring and reporting were the ones that tended to then report it in the articles. And this is, again, interesting in terms of, many of these projects set out to have more social outcomes, or actually didn't set out in the beginning to document the outcomes, and therefore weren't reporting it in the literature. So this is one, again, happy to return to this in the questions, but a really interesting finding as we think forward about how nonprofit partners, federal agencies, and researchers may collaborate to better document these conservation outcomes on the ground. I realize that was a very quick flyover, but I will encourage you to look at the article itself and also look at some of these other pieces that have come out around it to dig into the findings. And I'll pass it now to Allison, who's going to talk about our early childhood piece. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. So now by this point, you all are experts in systematic reviews after hearing about 3, and now so this 4th one I can breeze right through, I'm sure. The guiding question for this one, as Martha and Nicole have said, incredibly important to figure this out. And so we knew we were looking at early childhood environmental education. What did we want to know? And this one had an outcome focus. What outcomes are early childhood EE programs reporting on? And what practices and strategies were being used to achieve those outcomes? So in the other ones, we had 2 sets of search terms. We had the early childhood search terms, which included things like childcare and daycare. And then we had the environmental education search terms, which were very similar to the other reviews, but we also added early childhood specific ones like forest kindergarten, forest schools, and nature preschool. Next, please. So once we had the questions, we did our search for this one and turned up over 1,600 abstracts to sort through. We vetted those, ended up with 258 where we read the full text, and then ended up with a final sample of 66. This review also included an update because the analysis took a while, and so we decided we wanted to update, so you can read the paper for how we went about that in terms of methods. And the criteria we used: was there an early childhood environmental education intervention assessed, a program of some sort? Did they actually measure and report on outcomes? And then our standard quality check. So in that final sample of 66, next slide. We did our basic kind of descriptive data that we were looking at. When were these papers published? And what we found and what we kind of expected was it's very recent. So it's a very recent focus on early childhood environmental education. And I believe now if we were to redo and update the search, that number would be much higher. That's a tremendous increase just from 2 to 6 to 16 to 42. It had the traditional kind of, oh, sorry, Judy, back one. It had the traditional North America focus, due largely in part to our English language parameter. And then the big finding here was it was mainly positive results reported. We talk a lot about why that is in the paper. Some of it's publication bias. Journals and readers like to read about positive results, but also it's early childhood. It's hard to measure outcomes in kids this young. And so that we believe that was part of the challenge on that. Next, please. We also looked at how long were the programs? Were these one-shot programs or were they kind of year-long programs? And you'll see actually a focus on the ongoing ones. So it included some brief, either one time or a unit, and also some that lasted. These were mostly like the nature preschools. So they have an ongoing curriculum that focuses on nature or the environment. A huge focus on formal programs. This would be schools as well as like daycare centers. And then we also looked at whether the program included a time in nature, and most of them did have the focus on time in nature. This time in nature varied tremendously. It could be something as simple as taking the kids right outside and looking at a tree, or it could going to a park, or it could just be bringing the materials, natural materials, into the classroom. Next slide. So this, as we said earlier, had the outcome focus and a practice focus. So we saw a range of outcomes. No surprise, we saw environmental outcomes, but we also saw a lot of other ones that are useful when talking about the value of early childhood environmental education: personal development, Even at this young age, we saw some academic outcomes, interpersonal development, health, and even a few that looked at civic engagement, even in this young age. Once we looked at those reported outcomes, we also looked at the practices that people were using to achieve those outcomes. Time in nature was a major one. We also saw kind of more early childhood ones, like play and movement, something you might not see if you're looking at high school programs. Then a bunch of other ones: knowledge and skill development, social interaction, creative arts, time to reflect, think and observe, action taking, family connection, and personal connection. If we had time to dig through those, you would see it's really a mix of environmental education practices and early childhood best practices. Next slide. We did our thematic analysis as well and found two main roles. And as I like the way Nicole framed our conservation one, it was kind of like of course, that's what we found, the duh, but they are important points. And one of them is the vital role of adult mentors, teachers, and facilitators as kind of a guide on this environmental education journey. This doesn't mean that we don't value the unstructured playtime that kids need. It's that we actually counted the adults as having a role in that they made sure kids have that kind of unstructured playtime. And that may seem like adults not involved or mentors not involved, but they are just guaranteeing that that time happens. And we really saw lots of authors talking about how important it was just for the adults and or young adults that were helping to guide these kids as they learn. So it wasn't already standing in front of a classroom, and rarely was it standing in front of the classroom and instructing, it was guiding the kids as they learned. And we were really impressed how many environmental education programs were developed and undertaken with just very modest resources. As I said, they didn't have to travel 2 hours to go to a national park that may not be close by. They were able to bring in resources right in their backyard or right into the classroom through bringing in leaves or bringing in bark or things like that. Seashells was one of the ones I remember. And one program, they didn't even bring in anything. They actually had the children imagine being in a natural area and imagining the universe and their place in it. So we were really impressed by the range of practices that early environmental educators were using to connect to nature. Next slide. And so finally, there's the last citation for that one. And so that one was really quick because I know you all are experts in systematic reviews now, and I will throw it. It's either Tanoya or Judy, I believe.
Yes, we're going to go to Tanoya. Thanks to the three of you. And Tanoya, are you ready for your piece?
I am. Thank you to all of the wonderful researchers, the advisory board, and the team that I get to work with. As you all can see, it's a lot of work and a lot of effort. So we're really excited to bring all of these resources to you. In the chat, I just threw in a few links that you can explore later because I'm going to be mentioning a few ways to dive into the research even more. Next slide, please. So we've talked a lot about EE Works, and you can get onto NAAWE.org, go under our work, click there. You can either find EE Works there, or you can just look under research and you can find links to all of the things that I'm going to speak about, not just EE Works. So when you click onto EE Works, you will also get to see our review process document that Drew Burnett actually just put into the chat for you all to access, and you can dive more into the methods and all of the research that was done to bring this great information to you all. Also mentioned, EE Research is a database that you can access. We have over 1,700 summaries of all of these great journal articles, a lot that are cited within EE Works and other projects. And so especially if you don't access to a university login or access to a research hub, this is a great place to support your work. As well as EE Learn Research and Evaluation. It is a module that we have that can introduce you to research and evaluation for all of your work and your partners. It's a really great tool. It takes about 3 hours to get through, but you get a lot of really great content, as well as lots of support for your work. Next slide, please. So we're super excited to bring to you early childhood, hopefully at the end of this month. So definitely stay tuned. But the next outcome areas are super exciting, and we're excited to have the Stanford team working on that currently as we speak. So get ready for youth development and civic engagement. And like Judy mentioned, a summary paper where we're going to talk about all the lessons learned. So we're really excited to round out this great project that's been a wonderful effort on everyone's part. And we hope that you'll jump online and dive into the research and share lots more about how you hope to use these tools in the future. And with that, Anne is going to launch a poll for us because we'd love to hear how you think you might be able to use EE Works, because we'd love to hear those stories of how it can support your work. So thank you all for coming.
Thanks, Tanoia. And hopefully everybody will be filling out the poll right now. You can see it. And then Anne will share the results so you get a sense of kind of how you think a project like this can help. And once we're ready with that, then we'll take any additional questions that you have and then close out. But Allison, Nicole, and Martha, thank you so much for the great presentations. And here we have the winner is program development, to use this to help think about how you're developing your programs. But if you look at the other, funding support, policy support, professional development, and all of the above, there's use with this kind of work to help support us in a number of different ways for those of you who are working in this field. So very exciting on that. And now we do want to open it up. And Anne, I'm going to go to you since I can't see the chat to see if there are any additional questions. And if you have a question, feel free to enter it into the chat. I know we have a couple more.
Yes, there's a couple of questions here in the chat. Keep them coming and we'll go through as many as we can in the time we've got. There is one question here from Catherine, and this is probably a question for Nicole, and she's asking for organizations that measure pollution. When you're talking about conservation outcomes, how are those organizations connecting changes in pollution directly to their program? And it seems like there might be many other variables to consider. And Catherine works in stormwater education, and this is a common question that she finds that comes up in her work. How do you link those outcomes to your actual program? So I don't know if Nicole, you have any thoughts about that.
Yeah, that's a great question. I can answer partially, and then I also invite Allison, since we worked on that together. I mean, it's a great and a complicated question, and it's one that links to why it was tricky to find articles that were in this vein. There were a number of different ways that organizations did this, and we have in the overview article, we have included those articles that have done this. I mean, there were some that were specifically looking at, these are the ones that had the action embedded in the project itself. So for example, they would have an environmental education program where they have participants actually taking some kind of stormwater or pollution related action during the program. And so therefore they are linking the improvement in whatever the environmental quality improvement is to that direct action during the program. The ones that are not that direct, it gets harder. So if it's, for example, somebody self-reporting a behavior once they get home, it's much harder to make a link from that behavior to the improvement in environmental quality. So that's where it gets dicier the further that action is from the environmental quality improvement. Allison, I don't know if you have other details you'd like to provide on that.
That was great. I think you hit on it, that it's hard to do. It's difficult, it's expensive, and it requires a lot of forethought, which was kind of one of our main findings there. I do remember reading some programs that did exactly what Nicole was saying, right? They said, okay, we had this many people say, I'm going to go home and take this action. And then they would find data to extrapolate that action and say, okay, if this many people said that I'm going to take this action, then if that one action saves this much, CO2 emissions, or this action leads to a reduction in the release of a pollutant, then they would multiply it by how many people. But it made it difficult to compare studies. And so this points to one of of the challenges that in why systematic reviews are so good in like medical research is it's easy when you have interventions that are all the same, right? That you have a very specific population and they're having the outcome is measured in the same way. When you get into the social sciences, when you get into education, it's so difficult to compare the different outcomes. So definitely follow up with us and we can point you to the specific studies that we see about pollution or stormwater. It's just with that many studies, I can't keep them all in my head, so I can't remember all the details.
Martha, we have a question for you about what do you see based on your initial research here of the next steps for understanding more about climate change education and the link to civic engagement? Are there things that you would recommend for the future of us learning?
Oh boy. So I think that climate change is one of those great examples of an environmental issue that it's easy to be depressed because an individual action isn't likely to make a huge dent in the problem, but it's a perfect opportunity for collective action. And collective action happens when communities get together, when governments make decisions, when people enforce rules and regulations. And so that's the civic activity that is going to be needed and necessary. And also, of course, international activity would help too. So to one extent, climate change can help environmental education move from individual behavior to collective behavior and civic behavior. So that's one way of looking at it. From that lens, I think that what's really important to be looking at in terms of research or evaluation is the degree to which people can use sort of a systems thinking lens and say, my action is appropriate for this kind of assessment. And to get this kind of a change or assessment, I need a different kind of action, so that we're linking these together in an appropriate way. And then how to measure these things is always interesting. And what is it that we should be defining as civic collective efficacy? And how do we know the learners and participants gain it from our program? And so those are all areas that would be great if people were doing work in.
Thanks, Martha. And I don't know, Nicole or Allison, any thoughts on climate change and civic engagement, or from the conservation one, Nicole and Allison, the whole idea of civic engagement? I know we're doing a whole theme on civic engagement. Any hints from the next one?
I would amplify what Martha has just said here. I think that this is one of the areas that needs a lot more attention. It's something we actually have a number of empirical studies in this area currently as well, which is that idea that in order to keep people motivated and moving toward addressing these issues, the importance of continuing to kind of build that not only individual, but also collective civic muscle and engagement. And that climate is one example of many in the environment sustainability area that really poses this challenge, because you can't see the impact of your action individually, but together we can all make a huge difference. I mean, I think, as somebody mentioned earlier, pollution is another really great one that we need all of us together working toward these issues. One of my favorite examples in the conservation world that didn't make it into our sample, but it's one that one of my doctoral students worked on, is invasive species in Hawaii, which is another perfect collective action problem, because it's not one person dealing with invasive species, it's everybody dealing with it together. Wildfire is another great example of this. And so these are all places where the kind of questions around civic engagement and collective action and environment all intertwined. So those are guests to be continued in the civic engagement EE Works, which is the next one coming up.
Thanks, Nicole. Okay, Anne, I think you have another question.
Yes, I have one more that came in at registration. They're asking, how can we access free publications proving the benefits of EE for executive functioning? I don't know if that was covered in the K through 12, the student outcomes, or if you can preview anything for youth development, or if you can speak to that. I see Allison shaking her head, yes.
I can. So yes, I wish I had the link to, I know there's some great stuff on the web right now, so I don't know this off the top of my head, but no, you're absolutely right on. And that was a great lead in that in the K through 12 one, we talk about cognitive skills, and absolutely in the positive youth development, which was also a perfect tease for that one. That is certainly one of the positive youth development outcomes that we are looking into. So to echo Nicole's, more to come.
And Andrew had asked about literature in early childhood. And we do have an International Journal of Early Childhood Environmental Education. We will share that link you'll get that with all the materials, the PowerPoint, the chat, and everything else. We had one last question for all of you. What was the most surprising thing from your research so far?
I'll go first. How hard these are, and how it is a true team effort. And I'm not only talking about our internal team, at Stanford or at University of Florida, but also the advisory board, the amount of experts, just the amount of daily conversation that we have with colleagues informs your thinking. And how, although everyone in the medical field always says these systematic reviews are the way to go because they're so bias free, there are still so many subjective decisions to be made in these, and it is such a challenge.
That's a good one,
I'll go
Allison.
next.
Go, Martha.
Sorry, I'll just add that the huge diversity of ways that environmental educators do their work. When you look at, they were making maps with masking tape and push pins in Central Africa to look at climate change. They were using websites in Maryland. Just the huge diversity of ways people go about working and doing education and how they are successful. That was great.
Thanks, Martha. Nicole, any surprises?
Gosh, it's such a good question. I may go back to Allison's response partially, is that it's an enormous amount of work. I'm always so grateful when I see other people doing really thoughtful reviews, and I'm really blown away by the time and effort that it takes. And so when I see other people who've done really thoughtful reviews, I'm really impressed by that. I also, and similar to, I think, to Martha, I am so impressed by the incredible work that people are doing out in the world. I truly am I'm inspired by it. As I'm doing the reviews, I have to say the number of rabbit holes that we go down are just amazing, because there's so much to read and there's so much to do out in the world. I really find that our field is just incredible and so inspiring. It helps me feel hopeful about the future of the planet, because there are people doing just amazing work out there.
Nicole, Martha, Allison, thank you. I also want to again thank Tanoya and Drew on our team for managing all of this, Heidi and all of our other advisors, and Anne, of course. So I'm going to turn it over to you to close us out, but thank you all so much for this work.
You make such an incredibly complicated work seem so seamless and easy to understand. Thank you all. And so we are just going to close today's webinar like we close all of our webinars, with just a handful of announcements. A reminder that everyone will be getting the webinar recording sent straight to your emails by tomorrow. We'll also be sharing the recording, the slides, and all of the notes with all of you. We'll be sharing it on EE Pro on the same page you went to register for today's webinar. And if you liked today's webinar, I invite you to check out our entire webinar series. It's on EE Pro. You can find it if you head over to the learning section, and that first bullet is our monthly webinar series. We have so many webinars and webinar recordings on there now, going back years. So check it out if you ever have a free moment. So much to learn on EE Pro. And if you really enjoyed the webinar today, I invite you to consider becoming a member of NAAEE. By becoming a member, you will be joining an incredible global network of practitioners and researchers that are all dedicated to supporting great environmental education work, like EE Works, like our webinar series. And we have brand new ways to become a member. You can be a sustaining member, and we also have special discounts for students and retired folks. So join join us, and we really appreciate our members. And I'm just going to end with a couple of announcements on 2 conferences coming up. The first one is the annual Natural Start Conference. It's happening this July, so just in a couple of weeks. It is the Nature-Based Early Learning Conference, and it is the largest gathering of nature-based early education professionals happening. So please join us. Registration is open now. And registration will get you over 120 sessions live and on demand. And Natural Start is experimenting with a few new things this year, including virtual tours of nature preschools in the US and abroad. It's pretty cool. The other conference that we've got coming up is our NAAE, our annual conference and research symposium, both happening this October. Save the dates now, and registration is going to be opening up later this summer. The conference theme this year is the power of connection, and we will be celebrating our 50th anniversary. So lots of special events to look forward to for our conference this year. We have a number of speakers that are already invited, like EPA Administrator Michael Regan. And we have some confirmed speakers like Dr. Ray Wynn Grant, a National Geographic explorer and biologist, and Jen Morris, the CEO of the Nature Conservancy. Also confirmed is Dr. John King, who was the former Secretary of Education under the Obama administration and is now the president of the Education Trust. So we've got an incredible lineup of speakers planned, so I hope you'll all join us. And that is all of our announcements so far today. Thanks again to our wonderful panelists. Thanks you to all of you for all the great discussion in the chat. And thank you, Judy and Nicole and Martha and Allison and everyone that's here with us today. Hope to see you on another webinar very, very soon. So take care, everybody. We'll see you soon.
Thanks. Thanks, Anne.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
You all do such a wonderful job of this. Although they're gone. Tanoya, you'll have to tell them. Oh, Anne, you're still there. Great.
I'm still here. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you later.
Thank you all so much. Really appreciate it. It's great to see you for the last 2 days.
Take
Great
care.
job, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.